Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second statewide Digital Equity Planning Group meeting. A few housekeeping items before we begin. As announced, this meeting is being recorded. The California Department of Technology will be posting a video of this meeting, slides, and transcript to the Broadband for All portal. Before we get started with the formal agenda, we would like to go over a few housekeeping items as well. Presenters, PQ Anna to forward your slide. We have the Q&A box as well as the chat box for the public to enter questions and comments during the meeting. And however, during each section of the agenda, Director Bailey Crimmins will prompt SPG members to comment on the agenda portion, and we will have a Q&A portion towards the end of the meeting for the public to chime in. And note that we also have captioning options on the bottom of the screen toolbar, so please keep that in mind if that's something you would need. Before we get started, we would like to go over the organizations who are here today. I will read over the organization's names. Please go off mute and announce your presence. So California Department of Technology.
Here.
Thank you. California Public Utility Commission.
I am here.
Thank you. Department of General Services.
Here.
Thank you. Department of Education.
Present.
Thank you. Department of Food and Agriculture.
Here.
Thank you. California Emerging Technology Fund.
Present.
Thank you. California Transportation Agency.
Present.
Thank you. California State Library.
Present.
Governor's Office of Tribal Affairs.
Here.
Thank you. Government Operations Agency. No worries, we'll come back to that. Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development.
Present.
Thank you. California Department of Aging.
Present.
Thank you. Department of Correctional Rehabilitation.
Here.
Thank you. California Office of Data and Innovation.
Present.
Thank you. Department of Public Health.
Present.
Thank you. Department of Rehabilitation.
Present.
Thanks. Housing and Community Development.
Here.
Thank you. California Department of Veterans Affairs.
Yeah, good afternoon, I'm here.
Thank you. Department of Social Services.
Here.
Thank you. Labor and Workforce Development Agency. Make note of that and circle back as needed. Lastly, Rural Counties Representative of California. Okay, we'll make note of that as well. With that, Director Bailey Crimmins, I will hand over the mic to you.
Excuse me, before you go on, I think you forgot the California Office of Emergency Services.
Thank you, Monisha. Thank you
No
for
problem.
speaking up. Of course. Would you now? Thank you for that. Yes. Thank you for being here. And
Anne?
am I missing anyone else?
Anne, could you call out, I think Abby Snee is here from the Labor and Workforce Development.
Okay.
Would you call her again? Abby, are you able to unmute?
Deputy Secretary Abby Snee from Labor and Workforce Development Agency.
Okay, she's on, so let's
Okay. We'll pull her into off mic when we can. But thank you. I'll pass the mic over to Director Liana Bailey Crimmins, the Director of Department of Technology, to provide a brief welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I was nicely introduced already. Leanna Bailey Crimmins, the Director of California Department of Technology. And so the few slides that I have, I just want to really set the stage of really what to expect when it comes to the agenda today. A lot of meaty topics, a lot of progress has been made. I want to make sure you're aware of what's been going on, feet on ground in many circumstances, and also just remind you of the importance of what we're doing here in relation to establishing through the statewide planning group of actually establishing the digital equity plan. And again, making sure that every Californian has a voice in the process. So before we begin, I just want to maybe go ahead and go to the agenda slide. Let's talk about kind of what to expect. We do have Scott Adams, the Deputy Director of the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy. He's going to talk about what's going on in relation to the Digital Equity Plan. I know there's a lot to get done between now and November, and so he will be providing us an update. We are also lucky to have Commissioner Hauk with us, and she's going to provide an update on the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. Most of you know it as BEAD. And then we have also a special guest, Gladys Palpa-Latok, from the Federal Program Office. She's a Federal Program Officer from the National Telecommunications Information Administration, also known as NTIA. And then really talking about the equity plan in general, what outcomes are happening in the work groups, where are we at when it comes to the survey? There's both an online and we're doing phone surveys. Also the mapping, making sure that the digital equity plan is looking at the ecosystems and making sure, again, no one gets left behind. And then there's the progress that's been going on, obviously, at the regional level. And I know we've had 3, and we do have obviously 17 more, and they're all coming up very quickly. And so we'll learn more about that. And then obviously your opportunity to participate today, this is one of many opportunities, but what I like for each of you is as we get through each of the topics, I will pause and ask if you have any comments or questions. And so the planning group will obviously have an opportunity to raise their hand. And we will also have a public comment option for people as stakeholders can also provide comments at the very end. And so Anna, why don't we go ahead and switch to the next slide. And so as most of you are aware, the Statewide Digital Equity Planning Group, also known as SDEP, is an advisory group consisting of the California Broadband Council members, which we had an earlier meeting today. It also represents statewide entities that advise the Department of Technology on how we can make sure that we have a comprehensive digital equity plan. And this group consists of members across state entities. It also provides services to cover populations and have subject matter expertise related to the policy areas that we're trying to address. The SPG also, along with other planning approaches, are designed to be a complementary process. As we are trying to inform the digital equity plan, we talk about workshops, these types of meetings, and this is your opportunity to make sure that we're not missing anything. We have no blind spots as we're going through that whole process. And the working group areas are obviously looking at public engagement, the workshops, and obviously looking at the asset inventory. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce Mr. Scott Adams, the Deputy Director of the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy, and he's going to give a general update. Scott.
Thank you, Director Bailey Crimmins, and good afternoon, members of the Statewide Planning Group and members of the public. It's really an honor to provide an update on the general progress that we've been making on the state digital equity and BEAD planning process. As Director Bailey Crimmins noted, there's we've created a kind of a multi-dimensional cross-cutting set of ways for stakeholders and partners and residents to engage and have their voice be heard and help shape the digital equity and BEAD planning processes. Wanted to really go over sort of a high level of the accomplishments to date thus far, and note that further on in the agenda, you'll hear some more specific details in all of these. But the first thing is today, this is the second of our statewide digital equity planning group, which really designed and intended to be a statewide forum for all stakeholders to stay up to date and ask questions and advise on where we're going with the digital equity plan. We've hosted 2 rounds of the outcome area working group meetings, which are virtual meetings to bring subject matter experts, community groups and residents from across the state to help identify digital equity barriers and recommend strategies and solutions, particularly in the outcome areas of education, health, workforce and economic development, digital inclusion and digital literacy, essential services, accessibility and civic participation, and tribal collaboration. And very proud that in those collective meetings, over 1,200 individuals and entities have participated in those. As Director Bailey Cremins noted, we've launched the phone survey. We have launched the excuse me, I got a cough. We've launched the digital equity ecosystem mapping tool for governments, community organizations, nonprofits, et cetera, and an additional one for ISPs. That's really critical for us to develop the statewide asset inventory of programs. You'll hear that later. We've developed the public online survey, and you'll hear where we are in the process of launching that. Held 3 of the regional planning workshops that our intention is to host 20 in every economic region across the state. So I've been in Merced, Fresno, and San Diego. We'll be in Chico and Santa Rosa tomorrow and Friday. We continue to take every opportunity to keep folks informed with our monthly Broadband for All email updates. And collectively, we've been able to engage in a meaningful way 4,200 stakeholders across the state in just the last couple of months. So next slide. Director Bailey Cremins, are you going to introduce Commissioner Houck for the BEAD update?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. First of all, before we do that, does anybody have questions for Mr. Scott Adams, specifically the planning group members? I'd like to give them an opportunity to raise their hand and ask you questions. All right, I see none, so we'll go ahead. And as always, I love to introduce Commissioner Houck and all the great progress that they're making at CPUC. Commissioner?
Great. Thank you, Secretary Bailey Cremins. I'm really happy to be here to talk about the BEAD program, and again, appreciate the collaboration and partnerships that we have with CDT on these joint efforts and all of the work that we're able to accomplish together. So again, I'm Commissioner Darcy Houck, one of 5 commissioners at the California Public Utilities Commission. I'm the lead commissioner on a number of our broadband initiatives, including the BEAD, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. And today I'm going to provide an overview of the BEAD program as well as the CPUC's process in implementing the BEAD program. And I'll conclude with a summary of where we are in the implementation process. So BEAD is a $42 billion program created by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's administered by the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, known as NTIA. NTIA will be distributing funds to the various states, Washington, D.C., and the U.S. territories based on the proportional number of unserved locations in each state and territory as determined by the FCC. The goal of the program is to get everyone in the nation online by building infrastructure and increasing adoption of high-speed internet. With the BEAD funding from NTIA, California is anticipating receiving between $900 million and $2 billion of the $42 billion. And California will be able to award subgrants to carry out broadband deployment activities. And some of these activities are listed here on the slide and include planning for the deployment of infrastructure, deploying or upgrading internet infrastructure, deploying infrastructure in multi-tenant buildings, implementing adoption and digital equity programs, and workforce and job training. However, before that can happen, we have to develop a plan and a process for deploying broadband equity. So as you can see here on the timeline in the slide, part of the BEAD process includes developing a 5-year action plan. The digital equity planning process will substantially inform the 5-year action plan. In fact, a draft of the digital equity plan will be incorporated into the initial 5-year action plan that will be submitted to NTIA. Next, the commission will then submit an initial proposal to NTIA in December of this year, and the initial proposal will largely be driven by the rulemaking process, which I'm going to cover in the next slide, which we just recently opened the proceeding. If you can go to the next slide, please. So the commission opened the rulemaking to determine rules for the BEAD program this year. As you can see, it was opened in April, and it's rulemaking 2302-016. And we're currently seeking comment from parties on 14 questions that are described in the order instituting rulemaking. Opening comments were filed in April. The rulemaking was opened in February. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. The comments were due on April 17th. We had 30 parties provide comments, and reply comments are due on May 8th. These comments will inform a staff proposal to implement the BEAD program, at which point we will take further comment. The staff proposal and the comments we received will lead to a proposed decision, which will implement the BEAD program rules, which will be used as part of the initial proposal for NTIA. We're also coordinating and working with CDT regarding public engagement meetings, and we'll be having regional tribal consultations. We noticed the meetings in our proceeding so that parties to the proceeding would also be aware of the community engagement meetings. And we're hoping to compile a summary of some of the outcomes and information gained through the community engagement process to submit into the record of the proceeding, so that we can also consider that feedback when looking at how to set the rules for the program. If you're interested in participating in the proceeding, either as a party or providing comments, this slide has information about how to contact our public advisor's office, who can give you information on the process to do that. We also have a tab in our docket card for the proceeding, which again is R2302-016, and you can submit comments directly into the docket card as well. Let's see, there's links here for again, finding out information about how to formally participate, how to contact our public advisor's office. We definitely want to hear back from you to make sure this program is going to serve the needs of your community, and that it's going to be able to do its job and get the funds out to get infrastructure in the ground and help to eliminate the digital divide. And so in closing, I just want to again reiterate that we're working with CDT and participating in the local regional meetings that are being held across the state this month and next month. And we'll be holding 3 tribal consultations in Northern, Southern, and Central California, and are also open to individual consultations if tribes want to contact us directly to set those up. We really look forward to getting out and talking with everyone and making sure this program is going to help do its part to get broadband to everyone here in California. And so with that, I will end my comments.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Houck. I'd like to open it up to the planning group to see if you have any questions of the commissioner. All right, I don't see any at this time, so we're going to go ahead and go on to the next agenda, which is from Gladys, Pal Talk. I'm trying to do my very best. She's a federal program officer, the state lead of the National Telecommunications Informational Administration. So with that, Gladys, if you wouldn't mind taking it away.
Thank you, Secretary. And you did a great job with the name. It's a big challenge, so thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Gladys Palpalatuk, and I am one of 2 federal program officers, or FPOs or state leads for California from NTIA, again, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. We work closely with CDT and CPUC to administer the digital equity and broadband equity access and deployment, or BEAD funding, that the commissioner just spoke about. Today is a short introduction about state broadband tables. They are being convened throughout the country as a regular opportunity to give and receive information from stakeholders in each state or territory in an organized and intentional setting. These convenings are a collection of groups, organizations, and individuals like yourselves that are aligned behind the goal of 100% adoption and consist of representatives from groups working to expand broadband deployment and access. NTIA and the state are fortunate that California is ahead of the curve, as always, with a long history of working to achieve digital equity. We're working in partnership with CDT and CPUC to complement their work and continue building these state tables, initially as a part or adjunct to the state planning group. The tables will coalesce stakeholders like today around a common goal of connecting everyone. We want the opportunity to engage groups that are adding value as we move through the BEAD and DE processes. We will, for example, share key announcements from NTIA, as well as present information to support stakeholder engagement about subjects such as the initial proposal, the challenge process guidelines, workforce issues, covered populations, and other subject matter. They will be complementary to the state BEAD and DE efforts. It is also an opportunity for questions and answers to NTIA. Thank you for having us today, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, and happy to take answers now if there's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gladys. We'll go ahead and start. Do any of the planning group members have questions of NTIA? All right, I see none. And obviously we will be doing public comment at the very end. So we'll just stay connected and see if there's anything that needs to come out of that item. Thank you, Gladys. I will now like to turn it over to Scott Adams, who will be talking to us about what's going on with the digital equity plan. Also, we have Robert Osborne, who's going to be talking from a CPUC lens of what's going on with BEAD. We will also, we are lucky enough to have some graduate students here that have been participating in many of the work groups. And so we do have an opportunity to hear from them on what's been going on local on the ground. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Scott Adams.
Thank you, Director Bailey Crimmins, members of the planning group and the public. Glad to provide a quick update. What we intend to do in this section is to get a little more granular on each of the different components of the planning process. Next slide, please. So what we wanted to always kind of begin our updates is presencing to the Broadband for All program in California. About 70 or 80% of that is has already been funded through Senate Bill 156 and through accompanying budget legislation. So all of the funding for the Middle Mile Initiative, the pre-existing CASIF grant programs that PUC administers, and the SB 156 related entities, as we look at how we're going to leverage the IIJA funding that's being administered by the NTIA through the digital equity and BEAD programs that states are being directed to, and this is really encouraging, to direct investments to the populations that are most impacted by the digital divide. So really wanted to put front and center that that these populations are really the universe of folks that our efforts moving forward on BEAD and digital equity should focus on. So individuals in covered household, aging individuals, incarcerated individuals, veterans, individuals with disabilities, individuals with language barriers, members of a racial or ethnic minority group, rural residents. And then you see boxes 9 and 10 that are in a different shade. Those are populations that are specifically called out in the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity that PUC is administering that program. And it's, Rob can talk about it more, but women and those who identify as female in the LGBTQI plus communities. And so just wanted to always level set that when we're here together. Next slide, please. What we really wanted to do is just show you, this is one of those like Build Back Better, meet the moment. That's what Broadband for All and Internet for All are, is an opportunity to address systemic inequities that have existed in our society. And so with the urgency of the challenge to overcome that, also come tight timelines to engage and plan. And so this timeline is just to really demonstrate for you. We received the Digital Equity Planning Grant in December. We've been doing the stakeholder mapping well beyond that. The boxes, the survey, the mapping, the data and gap analysis, the local outreach, those are all things that are occurring in a very compressed timeline. And we know, a lot of the entities we're working with, we're used to longer, more deliberate planning processes, and folks are, dealing with capacity issues. But, this timeline is to get us to where sometime in July or August, we have a draft plan that takes into consideration all of the inputs from the 5 planning components. We actually put that plan back out for a 30-day public comment period. And then we refine and incorporate any public comments that, identify things that have been missed or left out. And really the goal line we need to get to is that, the end of November, the draft digital equity plan has to be submitted back to NTIA. And then it's at that time, they'll be able to, they'll approve it. And then the state will be eligible to receive our statutory allocation of the $1.44 billion in digital equity capacity grants to support state entities and regional and local partners to help implement the plan and carry out, what's in the plan. And so I think this might be my last slide. Yep. Director Bailey Crimmins, back to you.
All right. So Director Osborne, if you'd go ahead and give us an update on what's going on with the BEAD program.
Thank you, Director Bailey Crimmins. So this timeline is rather complicated, but just a couple key points here. Where we are today, we're in the middle here in the statewide planning group meeting. In the middle of May, we will have the FCC will finalize the broadband map that will be used as the basis for determining how much money will be allocated to each state. We'll know about that allocation before the end of June. Then we'll know exactly how much money will it be expecting to get for the last mile funding for BEAD. One of the key milestones following that is the 5-year action plan, which is really a high-level strategy document. And a key component of that is public input and feedback. And to that end, we, as Deputy Director Adams has mentioned, we have the engagements that we've already started, 20 of those, and those are informing the 5-year action plan. They also tie into the rulemaking that Commissioner Houck mentioned earlier, and that rulemaking, as Commissioner Houck said, is underway. We have received comments, preliminary comments and reply comments are coming due in May. Where this all leads is the creation of a subgrantee program for last mile broadband deployment. So the 5-year action plan is due at the end of August, and then following that, there's an initial proposal that's due at the end of November. Apologies, that's not on this slide. That initial proposal will, once approved, trigger 20% of the allocation, and then the remaining 80% will be given to us upon approval of our final plan. So that's just some upcoming dates. I realize it's a little complicated with all the stuff on this slide, but the key points here are that we are working toward getting together a grant program, that would have roughly, as Commissioner Houck said, between $1 to $2 billion in additional last mile funding. And there are some key components about that grant program that are part of the rulemaking, such as workforce development requirements, match requirements, eligibility, challenge process. One last thing I want to mention regarding the challenge process, the NTIA just released a proposed model challenge process for states to consider, and they're inviting the public to comment on those. So I encourage people who are interested in this topic to download the model challenge process. You can find it just by doing a web search. And those comments, I believe, are due before May 5th. So thank you very much. Back to you, Director Bailey-Crimmins.
Thank you, Director Osborne. Scott, I know that this is a part of agenda item number 8. There's quite a few co-presenters with you. If I go ahead and tee it back over to you to make sure that each one gets introduced and that they get an opportunity to speak, and then we'll open it up to the planning group to see if they have any questions about this agenda item.
Absolutely. Thank you, Director Bailey-Crimmins. And so now this is where we want to provide a granular update on, the other work streams that are part of the digital equity planning process and the outcome area working groups. Like I said, we've engaged with, 2 rounds of 6 different working group sessions with over 1,200 entities. To help support this effort, we've hired 7 graduate student assistants to help pull together the data, the research, both the quantitative and qualitative inputs. So we wanted to have each of the graduate student assistants provide sort of a brief update on the summary of findings. And so I'd like to introduce first Kamaljeet Kaur-Gill, who's going to share just some of the high-level key learnings from the Digital Equity Education Outcome Area Working Group. Kamal?
Great. Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kamaljeet Gill. I'm a Master's of Public Policy student and a graduate student assistant supporting the statewide digital equity plan in Education Outcome Area Working Group. So some main takeaways from February Outcome Area Working Group meeting were around what is digital equity, why is it important, and we also went into what digital inequities exist. So some of the ones you could see on here are availability of ISPs, internet service providers, and availability of adequate connectivity is a barrier. So in some rural regions, there are only 1 to 2 providers of ISP. And of those 2 providers, sometimes only one qualifies for ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program. So families who live in the other side, where one of the other ISPs who doesn't qualify for the ASP region will either not have access to that resource, or schools are kind of bridging that gap by providing hotspots for families who don't have connection. Availability of adequate connectivity is also an issue. There are constant freezes and lags to internet, which is a common problem we saw for K-12 students and students who go to colleges and universities. This is also true for areas of urban region and pockets of urban areas as well. Next was affordability. This is a big barrier, both in terms of cost of devices and connectivities can be expensive. And it's especially expensive in rural areas because it's hard to even connect those regions. Adoption to internet broadband or the lack of is also a barrier. Some student learning experiences aren't as fulfilling due to lack of connectivity at home, specifically families who are facing poverty. This is again true for K-12 students, but also students attending colleges and universities. And lastly, around digital literacy, there needs to be more support and building of skill sets for teachers and parents so they can ensure that students have the tools and the things they need to be successful. Next. So in March, we kind of talked about what are the disparate outcomes in education because of digital inequities. So first we kind of looked at was, we learned that type of technology used varies and differs from teacher to teacher, from district to district. So the type of technology being used or not being used in classrooms can cause disparate outcomes. lack of technology and connectivity at home, again, due to socioeconomic statuses. So families who have the means to afford connection will always have it. But those who are negatively impacted most are families from lower income backgrounds and who have to decide between either they're going to be paying for their groceries this month or for internet. And lastly, there are continued concerns around the Affordable Connectivity Program expiring. How sustainable is it for families? And when it expires, will the families be left with a larger bill to pay than they can actually afford? Thank you so much. I'll pass it on to Latifa next.
Yeah, and thank you, Kamal. And so Latifa Mubarak is the graduate student assistant supporting the Health Outcome Area Working Group. Latifa.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Kamal. My name is Latifa. As you've mentioned, I'm a student from the Goma School of Public Policy and a graduate student assistant supporting the Health Outcome Area Working Group. And it's indeed a great honor to be presenting to you some of the takeaways from the Health Working Group sessions that we've held within the months of February and March. So during the February Outcome Area Working Group, we started broadly by just understanding what digital equity really means for the different stakeholders in the group. And unanimous definition was the accessibility of digital tools and services for all. We also saw that while telehealth and virtual care tools have become very critical in the community, particularly after the pandemic, the existing digital barriers still continue to prevent people from accessing these services, hence the urgent need to bridge the digital divide. We also discussed some existing successful initiatives like the ACP and other subsidies that have been instrumental in reducing health and digital equity gaps. We saw that conducting different pilot projects for implementing telehealth has been able to successfully identify barriers to access and highlight areas where improvement is needed. And these pilot projects are also helpful in helping stakeholders identify potential solutions to overcome these barriers. Moving on to the March meeting, next slide, please. We saw that digital inequities can also impact health outcomes and continue to exacerbate health disparities, especially for vulnerable communities. Our efforts thus must be concentrated on broadband access, access to technology, and education on how to use technology to access these services. We also highlighted the importance of community involvement in co-designing potential solutions. And we heard from several stakeholders that different communities have very, very different unique needs across the board. And so it's important to highlight and center the needs and the voices of the community as we design the solutions. And in addition, we also saw that stakeholders need to work together across sectors and in a unified manner, because this really increases the impact in the efforts. And it also helps in closing the digital divide and improving access to telehealth. So that's it. I will pass it on to Camila.
Hello, everyone. So as Latifa said, my name is Camila, and I'm also a graduate student from UC Berkeley, and I'm pursuing a master's in public affairs, working on the Digital Literacy and Inclusion Outcome Area Working Group. In February, we held a listening session where participants shared their perspectives on digital equity, including the barriers they faced and strategies to address them. One of the key takeaways from the meeting was that digital equity must intersect all covered populations. And also barriers include the lack of infrastructure. So reliable and fast broadband is essential for covered populations. On top of that, affordability of devices or broadband and accessibility are critical barriers, additionally to lack of awareness of ACP and government mistrust. Many people don't know about ACP. And if they do, they don't realize that they're eligible to ACP. And for some that know about ACP, they may be hesitant to apply because they don't feel comfortable sharing their personal information. So some interesting strategies that some of the participants addressed to actually work on these barriers are targeted outreach with trusted messengers that can really address the language and awareness barriers. And capacity funding should be flexible and directed towards marginalized organizations. Next slide. So moving on to March, we focused on digital inequities, disparities, and some shared best practices for digital literacy programs. Overall, participants shared that lack of access to devices and affordable, fast, reliable internet can leave people without the necessary digital skills to participate in the digital world. And these create various disparities in health, education, and more, as some of my colleagues have shared. Some of these, the way that we can actually work on this, and this is why it's very important to have multilingual, comprehensive tech support and digital literacy trainings to fully leverage digital equity. And some strategies and solutions shared are partnerships with philanthropy and state agencies, also community digital navigator and digital literacy trainings should address digital equity and inclusion. Thank you all, and I'll hand it on to Rita.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rita Fayaz, and I'm a graduate student studying public policy and supporting the Workforce and Economic Development Outcome Area Working Group. From our February meeting where we discussed digital barriers, we have 4 major takeaways that I'm excited to share with you all. The first barrier being lack of infrastructure in some rural and urban areas, which causes accessibility issues, high cost, fewer choices. Secondly, barriers related to language and culture were brought up as key issues. For language in particular, there is a need for training and apprenticeship programs to be available in multiple languages, so as to empower underserved communities for this covered population. Similarly, on the culture barrier aspect, having champions from within communities to encourage participation and also retention in programs that are designed to address digital equity is really essential. Next, the need for cross-agency and cross-organization coordination is important, so as to make sure that organizations are building upon each other's programs and they are maximizing the impact that they can have. Lastly, with regard to pathways programs and vocational training, it is really important to double down on efforts to connect those programs with jobs, with industry, and encourage industry participation overall in such programs and trainings. So moving on to our March meeting, where we discussed more barriers, challenges, as well as solutions. We have 5 major takeaways. So the first one is the need for, again, workforce development programs to be available in multiple languages. And we are talking about trainings that are held to encourage participation, to build broadband, to build that infrastructure. We need to have multiple languages so that people from varied underserved communities can participate and get really good high-paying jobs. Nextly, collaboration and partnership are essential. This point was reiterated from our February meeting by several folks. Next, we have the fact that education entities can have a really important impact in encouraging workforce participation and also helping with some of the digital barriers that exist. These organizations like community colleges, labor unions, nonprofits are already usually embedded within communities. There's usually a lot of trust within those organizations, and they also happen to cover a lot of our covered populations and underserved and marginalized communities. So investing in them and supporting them is going to play a really key role in meeting some of our digital equity as well as workforce development goals. Next, our last 2 points are pretty linked with each other. We need to emphasize and think about the human element in technology adoption and digital literacy. Organizations should work together to transform identities of populations they serve in the sense of making them feel comfortable with technology adoption. There's a lot of barriers there. Again, goes back to the culture standpoint as well. So having long-term engagement with communities and having community champions is really essential to make technology seem more accessible and make people feel more comfortable with that. So with that, I think we'll hand it off to Noel for essential services.
Hi, everyone. My name is Noel Fakaji. I'm a Master of Public Policy student supporting the Essential Services, Accessibility, and Civic Engagement Working Group. In our February meeting, we first spent some time defining digital equity. And in this particular outcome area, we said that it means having equal access to information and government services, getting equal benefit from those services, and then specifically for accessibility, if something like a website meets accessible guidelines, but it takes longer for people with different needs to access, that's not equitable. We also discussed some common digital equity barriers. As other working groups have mentioned, broadband availability, adoption, and affordability are all kind of baseline needs to first even getting online. Another common barrier are language barriers for non-English speakers. So that relates to things like webinars, websites, public meetings. Specifically for civic engagement events, we discussed how things like transportation and lack of childcare can be barriers to participation. And then lastly, a lack of trust in government due to historical harm can prevent people from seeking services or wanting to get involved. And some strategies to help overcome these things that are already being used are things like universal web design standards. So CDT has a whole suite of standards available that can be used by any state or even non-state entities. There are a lot of accessibility toolkits out there. The Department of Rehabilitation shared one, but there's a lot available. And then also we highlighted partnering with community-based organizations to help kind of bridge that possible barrier of trust with communities because they already have connections and can be a good resource. And then moving on to March, we spent some time defining what we're even talking about when we're discussing essential services and civic engagement. So by essential services, we're saying this encompasses both government and non-government provided services for individuals. So it can be things like utilities, the water, electricity, things necessary to live. Also things like childcare, education, a lot of the other health and human services outcomes that we've talked about previously. And specific for this working group, social safety net programs came up. And then in the financial realm, this is kind of an example of a non-government service, things like online banking. And then lastly, safety and emergency services are essential services. And then for civic engagement, we're really talking about city council meetings, school board meetings, justice system hearings. And then lastly, we spent some time discussing unequal outcomes that happen due to digital inequity. So any of these essential services we previously mentioned could have disparate usage if people are not able to access them, differential access to information. And we also highlighted that a lack of broadband availability can create more challenges for emergency preparedness and recovery. And with that, I'll pass it off to Zach.
Thank you, Noel. My name is Zach. I am a Master in Public Policy student and supporting our Tribal Collaboration Outcome Area Working Group. In our first meeting, we discussed digital equity and its importance, and in doing so, identified a bunch of key factors that must be addressed when working towards digital equity, particularly in tribal communities. First among them are the larger issues of access and infrastructure. Many tribal lands are still without electricity and proper roads and other systems that are needed to not just attain broadband access, but to participate in other vital processes. When it comes to digital literacy on the adoption and use side, there may be fear or shame or just some hesitancy for some folks. A training that introduces, instructs, and empowers in a comfortable and welcoming setting is key to reducing fear and ensuring productive adoption. Practitioners find that once you get past that initial hesitancy, people are really eager to learn and develop skills. Finally, we at the state understand that capacity, administrative and otherwise, can be limited within already overburdened tribal governments and tribal serving organizations, which re-emphasizes the need for programs and resources that increase technical assistance and capacity building. At our next meeting in March, people provided input on the disparate outcomes that result from digital inequity. And so we can move to the March slide. Those disparate outcomes are apparent and ubiquitous, but so are examples of adoption, which provide hope. We understand the impacts on economic development, education, and health, particularly mental health care, that access to the internet can either restrict or enable. Partnerships, particularly government to government, are key, but must be done correctly through comprehensive engagement that is direct and recognizes the positionality of a particular tribal nation. Especially on the side of the state, we must be intentional about the difference between an informational session and a listening session, and a consultation or direct engagement. This has to be done with awareness of the capacity restraints that both the state and tribes face, which brings us to access to funding. Having access to funding also incorporates the burdens of application development, the flexibility of eligible uses, administrative set-asides, and reporting requirements. There's a clear need to allocate more funding for technical assistance and pre-capacity evaluation to determine what work actually needs to be done and how. This also includes increasing the resources available to improve the data that informs different funding programs so that they more accurately capture the real need of different communities. In all, the moment to address the digital divide in Indian country is unique and exciting for a lot of folks right now. And I'll now pass it off to Tish, who will share about the covered populations.
Thank you, Zach. So my name is Tishana Mann, and I'm a graduate student at Sacramento State in the Master of Public Policy and Administration program. I'm also a GSA here. My angle is through the lens of the 8 covered populations. So I'm just going to share some examples of barriers covered populations face and some programs related to solving those barriers to give you an idea of what I've been finding. So for rural communities, we found that diverse topography, large lots, low density neighborhoods, tall trees, all contribute to why rural counties struggle with being digitally redlined, which is when ISPs avoid servicing areas where they do not see the potential for high return on investment. And then for older adults, they may intersect different identities. They may be low income and non-English speakers and disabled, which means they face multiple barriers to accessing the internet, from affordability to adoption. And then for incarcerated individuals, it's common for the facilities to lack adequate Wi-Fi connectivity throughout the buildings. And so they rely on Starbucks parking lot style hotspots or have no connectivity in some areas. And then also sometimes when an individual is incarcerated for years and then released, they may enter a world where technology has advanced so much that they don't know how to use the kiosk at Panera or how to pump gas. And then lastly, some ethnic and racial minority communities might mistrust government and large corporations, so it's really difficult to reach them and discuss affordable offers. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of digital equity programs happening in California. So we've talked about funding the construction of more infrastructure in unserved and underserved areas. For aging populations, trusted community organizations such as AARP have done targeted outreach through phone banking and texting to promote ACP enrollment among older populations. Another program called Chat distributed free iPads and offered digital literacy training to aging adults as well. And then CDCR, which manages the state's prison system, has been giving out communication tablets to incarcerated individuals at no cost. By summer, every inmate is going to have a tablet, and these devices are going to help them communicate with family, access education, and stay up to date with the latest technology. And those tablets are expected to reduce recidivism and stress and help inmates reintegrate back into the workforce and society when released. And that concludes my summary.
Well, thank you very much. Folks, we just feel really fortunate to have been and be working with them, just a group of very talented graduate students to help support the work of the outcome area working groups. Director Bailey Crimmins, do you think, do we want to pause here to see if any of the planning group members have some questions?
I would love that. I know there was a lot of comments in chat, very impressive. The next generation of public policy leaders, it was great, obviously, we get to benefit from having them participate in our projects, but obviously California gets to benefit just because we have such great people here. So I'd love to open it up to any of the planning group to see if you have any other comments you'd like to make before we shift to the next part of the planning effort. I know that Sunny McPeak will be telling us more information there, but before we go there, any comments, questions? It's okay to recognize people. Sunny, you got to recognize them, right? I mean, gosh, you guys, this is a very, very impressive group.
Looks like Chief Equity.
I'm going to respond to Madam Chair, Director Bailey Crimmins. Yes, I want to be a cheerleader. I just sometimes think maybe I overdo it, but yes, congratulations to all the graduate students. And there are some very important themes that are running through all of the outcome area, findings and lessons learned that I think really remind us why we're doing the digital equity and BEAD plan. So that's what I was taking notes on, and appreciate the high level summaries that we just got. So congratulations. It's going to feed into all the work we're doing. And what we're doing out on the workshops is reminding everybody they can participate in the outcome area work groups very easily online, that they should be, and that it'll all be reinforcing. So thank you, Leanna.
Great, thank you.
Leanna, or Director Bailey Crimmins, it looked like, oh, I see.
Elizabeth and Sarah. So we'll go Elizabeth first. Elizabeth, would you like to comment?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for going through each of those different planning groups. That was really insightful information. So yeah, huge thanks to everybody's efforts there. I did have a question. I was just curious kind of about the participation in these groups of, are you guys getting good turnout, and maybe kind of for the upcoming meetings, just curious about, and maybe that's the next steps of what is the process, how many more meetings are taking place, and where we can kind of support to either expand outreach, because it seems like there's a lot of value in these groups and kind of gaining these insights that'll inform the plans.
Yeah, Lizzie, thanks for asking the question. I'll just say, so of the 6 working groups, there's been 2 meetings each, and collectively about 1,200 entities and individuals from across the state have, so like an average of 80 to 120 per working group. And so there's a call to action. It's kind of a progressive, working group, and it's open membership. So definitely all folks are welcome. And as Sunny said, it's kind of cross-cutting. We've tried to create a process where, given a lot of the entities working on this have their own capacity and schedule challenges, where they can jump in where it most fits with them. So there's going to be a call to action section at the end of this meeting, and we'll share all of the ways that the planning group member organizations can help support and amplify participation in all of the different programs.
Thank you, Scott, for providing that answer. I'm going to go ahead and have Sarah Poss provide a question.
Hi there. Sarah Poss from the Department of Housing and Community Development. I just wanted to thank the graduate students for all of the presentations. All of the takeaways seem like they're really applicable to a lot of our grant programs and to the barriers and challenges that we see. So really valuable feedback. But coming from HCD, I'm always thinking about homelessness. And when we were looking at the priority populations at the beginning of this process, my team and I were thinking about how homelessness factored in and whether we wanted to suggest that, the homeless population be a priority population. But really, homelessness touches so many of these groups that, it really just stretches across all of them. So I was just curious, particularly in maybe the education or feedback groups, if the topic of homelessness came up, and how do we, amplify best practices to increase digital equity among unhoused Californians. Obviously, we're working to prevent and end homelessness, so we don't want to keep having to find solutions to make sure that homeless people can access broadband. Hopefully it won't be an issue in the future, but until we solve that problem, we need to make sure that our unhoused population has broadband so that they can, access healthcare and education and job applications and housing applications. So just curious if any of those issues came up.
Yeah, and I don't mean to answer for everyone, but I would say, Sarah, thank you for raising that. I mean, the 8 covered, or well, the 10 covered populations that we're focusing on are directly the ones that the NTIA is asking states to focus on, given that, you know, broadband for all and internet for all is really trying to address the inequities of, you know, not having a wired home, you know, connection and a device and the skills and training to use that. I would say though, almost universally throughout members of the planning group and probably all of the outcome areas and our graduate students have identified that the unhoused are a very vulnerable population that have broadband, you know, needs. So there are, have been recommendations throughout on potentially how to address those, and you know, we're working with the graduate student assistants and the outcome area working groups to kind of think about how some solutions might be framed in the digital equity plan. But for instance, there's you know, as Tish said, the incarcerated population, as they come out of you know, re-enter into the population, they're vulnerable from a housing perspective as well. And the state library system has a really great program, you know, with these Go Kits. And so there's been a lot of internal conversation with the graduate students about how those potentially might be suggested as an option for connectivity. And you know, above and beyond that, there's been a lot of other great suggestions that will, you know, more than likely be summarized in the reports that the graduate students put together.
Thanks, Scott.
No.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Scott. Pam. Oh, you're on mute. Nope, you know, maybe we'll go ahead and go to Selena, and I'll come back to you if that's okay. Selena Chow.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the presentation and all the great work done in the working groups. I wanted to comment on a couple of populations or conversations in at least the working groups that I participated in, but I probably didn't hear too much of in the high level summaries. Yes, I agree the homeless and unsheltered population is one that we definitely need to have some additional conversation and focus on. I would also add the immigrant population, particularly with the issue of fear of public charge. If we're doing outreach and trying to encourage, you know, applying for these opportunities to get broadband assistance. And then I'm really glad to see that the LGBTQIA and intersectionality were kind of topics that were added at the earlier part of the presentation. I think that those are very important areas to look at. And then overall, just wanted to mention that I see a lot of commonalities. I'm really glad to see that there's some repeating themes in each of the working groups that have been brought up. And I'm just sort of curious, moving forward, do we envision that these working groups would stay the same as they were originally constructed, or would there be some need to maybe consider some of these common themes and have more discussion around those? That was just a general question that I'm probably getting ahead of, like the planning that's going to be happening, but just wanted to put it out there.
I think it's all like so thankful for like Selena, for your knowledge and wisdom and perspective, and for your comments. And I do think that you know, the thing that kind of all of us who are working on this have acknowledged is that there are universal and common barriers that persist for most folks as it relates to the digital divide. And what we're trying to be thoughtful and careful about is to just not assume that they're the same for everyone, and that there are some nuances for, like, you know, as it comes to devices and technology and software, for instance, for seniors and the disabled population, and how, you know, like you said, mistrust of, you know, government and corporations and concerns about being counted, et cetera, for both, you know, the immigrant population and members of ethnic and minority groups due to past trauma, that there are some definitely a lot of common barriers, some unique barriers that I think are going to be things that would be good options or good things to call out and potentially fund with digital equity capacity grants. We are keeping it for now in the outcome areas, because I think part of the work is, with community in those outcome areas, by identifying the barriers, that identifying how there are disparate outcomes in those areas, also have a conversation about how those folks can continue to do more in a lot of ways, because they are the trusted messengers. We're being iterative as we go along, and think that really appreciate your suggestion about how to bring it all together. And that's ultimately what the process is intended to do.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Selena. Thank you, Scott. All right, Pam, is your
Can you
mic
hear
working?
me?
Yes.
Yep.
we-
Can
yep.
you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
I think a bunch of us put our hands up at your encouragement to be cheerleaders. Perhaps some of those who didn't get to be cheerleaders in high school, but that's another story. But I really just wanted to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, and I think some of my questions have been answered at the great work that our graduate assistant students and our staff continue to do. I've been participating in the Essential Services Committee, and it's just really helpful to hear what's being discussed and the findings of the other groups to kind of bring it all together. So keep up the good work, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. All right, Scott, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you. I know there's a few other presentations a part of this particular agenda item, but thank you so much for the opportunity, because it is a big one and it is very informative. So just breaking it up a little bit. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Could we bring the slides back up? Great. So Sunny McPeak, one of the components of the digital equity planning process is the phone survey. Can you please provide the planning group with an update on what we're finding so far?
Yes, I can, Scott. And I also want to thank you and Anne and Rishnavas for your assistance on putting together this very colorful slide. So the good news is that we've hit a big milestone this week. The characteristics of this work stream is to have a very large sample that together is 3,200 that is randomly selected. Random selection is intended to ensure that we have the most representative sampling of all Californians. And it's important to underscore there is no list of all Californians. And so the methodology that for decades has been used by surveyors is what is called random digit dialing, RDD. There are firms that provide a very reliable randomized telephone list, and then from that list we call. We look to, in the design that came from the California Department of Technology, to have first a sample that was 1,650 that were all statewide, and then we would do another 1,550 that is oversampling. We want to oversample for some of the covered populations, and in particular, as large a state as California is, and as many counties as we have, out of the 58 counties, 40 are really rural. And so in order to be able to represent a lot of the geography and the residents in the geography, we focused on oversampling of rural residents, also people with disabilities, low-income households we intend to target. And we're still looking at, is there a reliable methodology to actually directly reach veterans as a covered population? Having said that, what is new today versus any other previous survey statewide that we participated in is very aggressive blocking of what might be perceived as spam by the consumer. And that's being done at the urging of our governments, our federal government in particular. So the telephone companies, internet service providers are complying. As an example, we have been needing to take twice the effort and therefore twice the length of time to complete a given survey. The good news is that at 1,000, we reach what is one of the other very important parameters, which is within a margin of error of 3% or less. Typically, when CETF has done the statewide survey, which we've done since 2008, we've actually had that sample that's 1650 in order to get a large enough sample by region. Oversampling is able to handle and offset that, and we reach at 1,000 that 3% margin of error. And last night we crossed over the threshold of getting 1,000 surveys. So I'm very pleased to share that with the statewide planning group, as I did today with the California Broadband Council. What we, and you can see what we had on Monday was coming close to that, which is when we provided the content for this site. What is interesting to see is that there has been an increase from 2021 to getting to 92% connected. 90% of those that are connected are people with disabilities, 89% older residents. So those who have been disadvantaged before have continued to increase their connectivity. So it's not just the population overall, but those that have been the most disadvantaged were at 87%. Latino households, 85%, low-income households. And here's where we need to now stop and take pause. First of all, I also want to say that there's an increasing number of households who request to take the survey in a language other than English, which is also representative of California. And in getting to the 1,000 surveys, 60,000 people plus were called. In fact, more like 63,000. And so there's 60,000 numbers that are random numbers of people who did not answer the phone or it went to an answering machine. Now, the good news is those numbers are a random sample of California that fortunately we can take advantage of another work stream that will be reported on, which is the online survey. So we're going to be able to probably in the end gather more than 3,200 into the random sample, but we are having to adjust to these realities. Now, I said we needed to stop and take note. So if you just look at this beautiful rainbow that Rishna created, established last night, and go to where it is orange. Here is sobering news for all of us. There are 5.8 million households in California that are eligible for the Affordable Connectivity Program, and 67% of them are not aware that they're eligible for the benefit. So that's just huge. That's sobering. We can cure that, respond to that, if we can just notify directly those who are on those qualifying programs, such as Medi-Cal, CalFresh, WIC, National School Lunch Program, Pell. Those are the big ones that they are eligible. If we do that, 80% will sign themselves up. We'll still need to help 20% of them in person. So right now, only 32% of those households in this random survey who have children in school are aware of ACP. Only 31% of all low-income households are aware. The good news is that only 1% are underconnected. We use the term underconnected to mean those who have a smartphone only. So they're connected to the internet, but they're connected only with a smartphone. And what has caused the difference to drop in that underconnected population is actually the number of schools who are providing devices to their students and allowing them to go home. So there we are in our response. I think I've provided everybody with the essential information, Scott and Madam Chair.
Got it. Thank you, Sunny, so much. And so to reinforce, it's really important that the digital equity and BEAD plans are developed, not just with input from stakeholders and partners, but with input from communities and residents about their lived experiences. And given the size of the state and its population, we're trying to do that for a number of ways. But the survey was really one tool to help get kind of a scientific, measurable approach. And now that we're facing some challenges, to get to that oversample, it's really kind of supports the importance of the next thing that we wanted to brief the planning group members on, and that's the online mobile friendly version of the digital equity survey. And I just want to be mindful of folks that we want to be able to leave ample room for the Q&A for members of the public, so we can be judicious with our time. Richna, could you jump into the digital equity online survey, please?
Thank you, Scott. Hi, everyone. My name is Richna Vass. I work as a principal for broadband and digital equity with Broadband Equity Partnership. We are program advisors and project management consultants to CDT. You heard Sunny talk about the phone survey and about possibly reaching a milestone this week with 1,000 respondents. It's important for us to be able to supplement that phone survey with an online survey that we can actually disseminate statewide. This online survey is going to be released in the next 2 weeks. It is mobile friendly. It's available in 14 languages. It has built-in audio functionality to accommodate communities with limited English proficiency, limited literacy, and individuals with visual impairments. This survey, the online public survey, is meant to collect granular information from California households about barriers to broadband accessibility, affordability, and adoption. In addition to the online public survey, we've created a condensed version of this survey in paper format. So we've been disseminating these paper surveys at the local and regional events. And if you have communities that you know are unconnected and you think would benefit from completing the paper surveys, let us know, and we'll be happy to send you copies of them to share with your constituent groups. We need as many unconnected communities to be able to participate in this survey, and we need as many people to participate in the online public survey to get a good understanding of what the ecosystem looks like across California. So
Yeah.
An outreach toolkit will be available in the coming weeks so that you can actually use the toolkit to push this out with your constituent groups. So state agencies, organizations, any entity can actually have a toolkit to share with their communities about how to use the public survey and how to promote it with their constituent groups. Next slide.
Actually, Richna, are you still on the, are you going to move on from the online survey?
Yes.
Okay, here, I just wanted to, I know we were going to do call to action at the end, but in response to Lizzie's question earlier, this is the call to action, like a major call to action that we need help from the planning group members, the state agencies. If we understand there are constraints around sharing lists or consumer data, but if you have direct to consumer or service eligible populations, ability to text these out. This is where our intention is to try to get as much granular information from all 58 counties and have significant oversamples for each of the covered populations. And so that's what we would ask you all is, to think about, because we'll make the request, is that how can we then quickly, given the tools, leverage your networks to go to individuals and increase turnout. What we'd like to do aspirationally, if we could get 10,000 responses to the online survey in the state of California, that's would be a really good goal. So sorry, Rich, I just wanted to reinforce the importance of this tool you've helped us create, and would note that there's also a speed test that has been embedded into the survey. So it's really unique and kind of, one of a kind thus far. So hope everyone can help where they can.
Thank you, Scott. Next slide. So you heard Sunny talk about the phone survey. You heard us talk about the online public survey and the paper survey. We also have the organizational survey to conduct an asset inventory across the state. This organizational survey is known as the Digital Equity Ecosystem or Mapping Tool, the DEAM tool. And the Dean tool has been live for the last few weeks. Many of you have heard us talk about it so far. If you see the QR code, please scan that QR code, please click on the link, and please take this DEAM survey. It's really important for as many state agencies, as many CBOs, nonprofits, any entities that help communities get connected. It's important for these entities to take the survey so that we can actually get really important information about what's happening across the state. So if you leverage technology to provide a service to your communities, we'd love to hear from you. So please help participate in this program, help conduct the asset inventory across the state through sharing of your programs and your services. We'd love to hear from you. Next slide.
Rich. Hey, Rich, can I just make one comment too? And so members of the statewide planning group, if you haven't already, we would love for you to fill out the DEAM tool and just reinforce the ask that the call to action that Richna said is trusted community partners are like really critical. And we know that there are networks that are working to provide services to the overlapping vulnerable populations. It's critical that those folks are included in this asset inventory, because it's not, it's to help inform decisions, but it's also a way to kind of connect the dots at the local and regional areas. So, the folks who are going to be, leveraging digital equity capacity dollars, can know how to find and work together with one another. So sorry, Rich, back to you.
Sure. Next slide, please. So in the last few weeks since this DEAM tool has been live, we've been collecting data from several entities. So far, we see that 340 participants have opened or accessed the survey to explore it, but we've only really received 104 responses so far. Of those 104 responses, we've only had 67 folks complete it from start to finish. And you can see that most of the respondents are from Sacramento, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And we really need to do some work in reaching out to organizations that are in the rural areas and the northern and southern areas of the state. So again, there is a critical need to push this out and to make this available to as many organizations as possible, and to get as many responses as possible for this data to actually be statistically significant and to help inform the state's digital equity plan. Next slide. Please work with your constituent groups, state agencies, entities. Please use the toolkit that we've provided. This DEAM tool is available in Spanish. There's also a DEAM tool for ISPs. We'd love to hear if there are any suggestions on making it better for the future. We would love for you to be able to share with us your list, or let us know if you are able to push this out to lists of other entities and other organizations that you serve, so that we can get a representative sampling and understanding of what the response rates can be for the state of California. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us about it. And we look forward to learning about your very impactful programs and services through your agencies and organizations. And with that, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Hey, thanks so much, Richna, and really just appreciate the comments that are going on the chat, and we'll be able to answer some questions in the meeting. Want to go on to the next section, which is the other component, which is the regional planning workshops. And I want to bring back Sunny McPeak from CTF, who is working with us in PEC, really, and local and regional partners, taking the lead on planning and execution on these critical local in-person engagement events. So it's Sunny, back to you.
Thank you, Scott. I do want to begin by thanking all of the state agency representatives that have been at all these workshops. To date, we have done 3 out of 20. There are 14 more that are scheduled in regions throughout California, and then 3 that will be with tribal leaders dedicated to a conversation around tribal issues. I love these photos that were selected by RSE and the state agencies. I think you did it personally, Scott, but to recognize that you and your team, and Anne in particular, who has brought all of the materials that everybody can see here to those workshops, that we've had from the Public Utilities Commission, Rob Osborne and Maria, who has been very, very helpful in getting us here, Maria Ellis. And then we've had the State Department of Technology, or the California Department of Technology, Middle Mile folks, and Golden State Net. So you can see actually here that we've had elected officials, Congress member Jim Costa from Fresno, and also Assembly member Joaquin Arambula, and lots of other legislators have sent representatives. And here's what is happening that I think is so important. For 3 hours, there are, anywhere from 60 to 100 plus residents in these regions coming together with state agency representatives and having a conversation in 2 small work groups around the covered populations, the 10 covered populations and the 6 outcome areas. Nobody is looking at their phone. Nobody is doing other things. They're engaged in a conversation. And then each table reports out one at a time their strategy for either a covered population, and then in the second exercise, an outcome area. And then everybody gets to get up and exercise, and you'll see in the left-hand corner, express where they think their region should focus. And this is one of many inputs to the state in doing the digital equity plan. But you can see it's good old-fashioned technology. I call it public policy by dots, but it's a way in which everybody has been interactive, listened to, and I think actually feels very, very validated for all of the state officials spending the time to reach out to them in person. I'll close by saying we all love the convenience of being able to be online as we are today. It saves a lot of time, a lot of impact on the environment, but there's a certain kind of magic that happens when people are in the room together, and that's coming through very loud and clear with great appreciation for this effort that you're all making.
And thanks, Sunny. I just wanted to reinforce that, we talk about, Director Bailey Crimmins said it's going to take a village. I mean, the digital divide has been persistent, issue for a long time. And although we're making great progress, the closer we get and the smaller the margin is, the harder it's going to be to fix that. So it's really going to take multi-level collaboration from the federal to the state to the regional and local level. And that is one of the things that I think is that I've taken away from these planning group meetings, is that you have all of those entities together. You have city and county administrators and officials, school and libraries officials, members of tribal nations, community-based organizations, promotoras, everyone's sitting down together. And aside from working together, they're making connections and building familiarity in coalitions, or building on existing coalitions that exist to work on this effort that could be supported by digital capacity grants. So really great work. There's a lot more to come. Lizzie, you asked the question. This is another one of those calls to action. Could we go to the next slide, please? As Sunny said, there are going to be 17 more workshops. These are the remaining workshops. We've got a QR code that can take folks directly to the Broadband for All website, where there are registration links, etc. So anyone on this call that has a distribution list, these are open meetings, and membership is determined by folks who can be gracious and allocate their time to come and spend. And like Sunny said, we were down in San Diego on a Friday, on a sunny Friday, and over 100 people. The workshop started at 12, and I think most of the crowd was still there at 5 o'clock. Not just finishing the program, but like swapping cards and talking about how they could align their efforts. So it's really good at community and coalition building as well. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, I think the next is going to be Sandra from RSE, going to talk about what you guys are doing to support the ongoing stakeholder engagement and relations.
Thank you, Scott. And hello, everyone. As Scott said, I'm Sandra Levy. I'm a managing supervisor at RSE, Runyon Saltzman. And as you might remember from the last statewide planning group meeting, our role is to reach the broad cross-section of California's digital equity stakeholders to promote their involvement in the planning process. And we create and share messaging that distills the highly technical information about broadband for all and the digital equity planning to a more digestible story about the digital divide that relates to people who are affected on the ground and encourages them to take action. And since we last updated you during January statewide planning group meeting, we've been hard at work at reaching out to the broad cross-section of California's digital equity stakeholders. We created the state digital equity landing page. You can see an example here on the slide, which offers stakeholders and community members a one-stop shop for information about the state digital equity plan, events, and other ways that they can make their voices heard. Next slide, please. Additionally, we've created toolkits that partners can use to invite community members to get involved. And we've created 165 pieces of content, including social media assets, handouts, flyers, invitation letters, articles, PowerPoint presentations, and news media outreach materials. And importantly, these materials have been created in language, including Spanish, traditional and simplified Chinese, Vietnamese, Tagalog, and Hmong. Next slide. So to get the word out and support attendance at the local events that Sunny was talking about and Deem Tool participation, we've been conducting news media outreach as well. And thus far, we've reached out to more than 700 regional, hyperlocal business, technology, and ethnic media outlets throughout the state. And we're seeing results, as you can see here on the slide. This quarter, we will continue to keep the momentum going as we promote both the local events and the Deem Tool. And to deepen the coverage, our team will work with regional organizations to learn more about the effects of the digital divide on communities across California and to provide a human perspective behind it. And we're really looking forward to promoting the launch of the online survey tool within the next couple weeks. So thank you. And now I'll hand back over to you, Scott, or Director Bailey Crimmins.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm sorry, Director Bailey Crimmins.
No, that's fine. I would just, we're just wrapping up this agenda item. Scott, any last comments before we open it up to the planning group? I will just say, I'm just so proud to be a part of what we are doing as a community to really move the needle on this. And it's not just words, it's action, and it is great to see. So I know that's, at least that's my comments to the team. Scott, anything you wanted before I open it up to everyone else?
No, I think you've captured it nicely. I would just say that we have constantly been impressed by partners at all levels across the board rising to the occasion to acknowledge that this is a huge problem and it's our moment. And I think people are meeting the moment and rising to the occasion, and just thankful for all the partnership and participation of folks on this call and other formats. It's been a wonderful experience so far. Now we need to get to the end goal, which is like making sure we close this divide and create digital equity in California.
Absolutely. Very well said. Thank you, Scott. I'll go ahead and open it up to any of the panel members. And then after we are done with that, we will open it up to the rest of the public for Q&A. So first, any panel members that have any comments? All right. Well, we will go ahead. And can we go ahead and make sure that everyone is aware of kind of the housekeeping and how we want to take public comment and questions? This is a little bit different. It's not a typical board meeting. It really is about Q&A. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. For For the Q&A portion, as before, please use your Zoom hand so that we can identify you in the participant list and elevate you essentially to unmute yourself. If there are any technical issues of unmuting yourself, please email us, and I have this email right here to check if you're sending it our way. And lastly, please use a QR code if you want to check out our website and have any of your frequent questions answered there as well. I saw 2 questions in the chat earlier, one from Shirley and then another from Daniel. So I just want to make sure to call you out, and so you can raise your hand. But right now I'll take a look at the attendee list and call on Carla first to ask your question.
Perfect. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Thank you.
I'm with the SF Tech Council, and so great to be here today. We have been promoting the DEAM tool like every day, everywhere with our, community members, partner organizations around the Bay and in San Francisco. The one thing we keep hearing from everybody is that it's really long. And so I don't know that everybody is, as you pointed out, the numbers that are completing it. Are you still going to consider, submissions that aren't fully complete as you look through these?
Yeah, and go ahead, Rich.
Yes, Carla, even partial responses are valid responses, and we do count them. They are incorporated in our data analysis. So that's helpful context. Thank you for sharing that information. We would at least like to hear from organizations about as much information that they can provide as possible. But we also have a process for sharing links or sharing data through a form, and we can definitely talk to you offline about how organizations can share their existing data sets with us if they feel that the DEAM tool is too long. So would love to continue this conversation with you offline.
Oh, great. Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, Carla, and that's just, I would respond. Thank you so much for the partnership with the folks at the SF Tech Council and also the Bay Area Digital Equity Coalition. Really appreciate the work you're doing there. I think I would just reiterate to any folks who are promoting the DEAM tool, any feedback we can get from you of like, Richna and her team are doing analysis of like where we think people are either getting fatigued or getting stopped. There is a readable version that has also been provided as a tool. But just know we thank you for promoting it, and we'll work with you in the ecosystem to continue to resolve issues to get the maximum feedback from that.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Carla. Shirley, I'm going back to your previous question. Are you able to come off mute?
Yes. Hi, Anne. Hi, Scott. I'm Shirley Lamb. I'm a senior policy analyst with Insure the Uninsured Project, or better known as ITUB. And my question was for the slide on the digital equity phone survey. And I noticed on it, it said that it's had 92% are connected, but I'm wondering, what does connected mean in this case? Is this connected to fiber, or is it connected to like any form of broadband? And is it including like speeds as well? Like the FCC has a standard of 25 megabits per second over 3 megabits per second. And I just wanted some clarity on that.
Oh, very good. I could answer that. So thank you for the question. What connected means is when an individual is participating in the survey, we ask, are you connected to the internet from your home? And it means by any technology. That can be by fiber, can be by cable, can be by wireless. And then we go on to ask several questions, including how satisfied are they, which is when they reflect if the speed is adequate. There's also this year a question about who is your provider and what are you paying on average? So we're getting all that additional information consumers don't generally know a lot about their own technology. So that's the follow-on questions after, are you connected to the internet, that we use to verify, in fact, they are, as opposed to simply having a smartphone. And then we sort out if they have a smartphone with a data plan, but that's what that means. There are other maps that the PUC has that actually identifies where the infrastructure exists that has capacity for 25.3 below or above.
Thank you so much, Sunny.
Yeah, hey Shirley, one thing I would want to add on that too is that obviously, you know, there's being connected, and then there's being connected at acceptable speeds that and bandwidth that Sunny talked about, that, you know, PUC is really measuring that. I want to go back to the online mobile friendly version of the survey. You know, it's hard to measure speed when you're doing a phone survey, particularly, you know, because not every resident knows how to quantify what speeds they're receiving. And so that's why we build in as both an interactive thing for folks who fill out the online survey speed test, where they can actually, in the survey, go to a speed test and upload, you know, what upload and download speeds they're receiving there. So, you know, we hope to get a little more kind of directional data from that to support, you know, the other data that PUC and others have. So we appreciate, like, you know, ITUP and the ITUP coalition and partners to, you know, help promote that, and know you guys will.
And Sunny, it looks like you have a follow-up that you wanted to mention.
I did, Madam Chair, and again, thanks Shirley for all of your partnership. Insure the Uninsured has been one of the biggest allies, as Scott just said, and I wanted to acknowledge that. I also want to say that there is a question that is new this year in that statewide survey, which is about how people choose to use the internet for healthcare visits. It's different than what we asked in the previous survey in 2021, which was tailored to shelter in place and the pandemic. And the encouraging sign is that people do want to participate, have the choices of being able to get health information online and all the other information that goes with not only if people are doing the online survey. So we do have real-time speed tests, but then follow-on question, Shirley, about how people use the internet that helps us understand, is their connection sufficient? Because you have to have a certain amount of bandwidth at home for application. So there's a lot of crosstab analysis that will eventually be done. I just shared top line today.
Thank you so much for all your responses.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Daniel had a question for us from earlier too.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm from the Public Health Alliance, Southern California. I'm a little new to the digital equity space, so forgive me if this question seems a little indicative of that. But with the DEEM tool, it just sounds incredible that all these resources, organizations, and their work in terms of digital equity are going to be collected. What is the timeline for that to be released, or is there will that be released to the public? I think that would just be an incredible tool, especially if it can have like county specific pieces to it too. But just curious about the results of the survey.
So Daniel,
thank you. Here, Rich, I'll take that one.
Okay.
Daniel, thank you for the question. We've had that question come up from other folks, because so I think here's what we would say on both the online survey, the phone survey, and the DEEM tool. We intend to share results of those with the community, as well as to use those to help inform decisions of the digital equity plan. What we need to do is right now is focus on getting as much good and comprehensive data as we can, and then there's going to be a sort of a data verification process to kind of go through that. what form we're able to share in is kind of going to be based on that. What, would love to hear from you folks about, and, you can shoot us an email or have a separate phone conversation, is what, both the print version of the DEAM tool and the digital equity survey are posted online on the digital equity page. And so to help us kind of think through, what kind of, want to hear from you all, like, which information do you think is going to be, most valuable and supportive, to regions and communities, to inform implementation of the plans.
Thank you. And then I just noticed now that Maddie has their hand raised.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks so much to everyone for all of the incredible work on this planning initiative so far. I'm Maddie Ribble. I'm Policy Director for Social Drivers of Health at the Children's Partnership. We work statewide to advance health equity and racial justice for California's kids. My question was just about how the different working groups are thinking about the particular needs of children and youth, which clearly cut across the different priority populations. Obviously, the impacts on children or youth are dramatic, related to digital equity. And there are some particular needs when it comes to the kinds of device access kids needs, digital literacy training, even sort of workforce skills training for older youth who are starting part-time jobs and so forth. So it's a question and a request if those particular needs could be addressed in the plan.
Yes, absolutely. I think that all of the focus is folks had mentioned, when you look at the covered populations, there's a lot of intersectionality there, and youth, any of those are I think barriers that are identified in strategies that would be developed to support the covered populations would be applicable to children and their families. And that's really why we've, created the outcome area working groups that we have, is that, digital equity, like a broadband and an internet connection and a device, are so critical to fully thriving in today's modern life. It's the bridge to education. It's the bridge to health outcomes and workforce development. So absolutely, Maddie, thank you for your comments, and we would love to have you join the working groups and bring voice to that, both your concerns and some ideas and strategies, on how to address those.
Thanks, Scott. It also looks like Sunny has a comment she'd like to make in relation to Maddie's question.
I wanted to thank you, Maddie, and just also acknowledge the Children's Partnership that was our partner in establishing School to Home about 13 years ago. I also wanted to tell you we're going to get a lot of information again this year in the statewide survey about families who have children in school in particular, as to the access to technology. And we also see in the data coming back from the ACP enrollment events, the in-person enrollment, where we have a higher percentage of participants, households who have children in school than in the population as a whole. And the bottom line is that still the schools in low-income areas are not providing as much access to technology as schools elsewhere, and that there is a lot of interest by parents to be trained in digital literacy to support their children's learning. So that's an observation I'll share. And then literally over half of those who are digitally disadvantaged in the statewide survey say they want more digital literacy training.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you. And George, I see your message in the chat. Would you be able to unmute yourself?
Hi, everyone. Georgia Savage from Oakland Undivided. My apologies if this was reviewed. I joined late, but I was just wondering, I know we talked about the regional workshops, so what have been sort of the biggest takeaways from those? And then have there been any changes implemented to upcoming events as a result of those learnings.
Sunny, is that a good one that you can, I know you've been facilitating.
I think Scott wants to, and then I will comment if there's need to, and thank Georgia for all of her help and tell you we're learning a ton, Georgia. So hopefully we're going to be really good by the time we do the last one.
Great to hear
that you're leading, and I'm going to learn a lot when I see you on the 6th, because I'll be there with your celebration. So
great,
Scott,
excited.
Yeah,
excited
Scott, why don't you, you're welcome, Georgia. Why don't you lead off, Scott?
Georgia, I was just going to say thank you for the question. There's been a lot of great learnings from the regional workshops. I think is earlier on in the presentation when we were sharing the learnings from the different outcome area working groups, some folks had indicated that there's a lot of a commonality, a lot of reoccurring themes that are showing up in the working groups. And I think that similarly so at the workshops in person, we're seeing a lot of identification of common barriers, a lot of really smart, shrewd, and similar conversations about the need for trusted messengers, specific trusted messengers for specific communities, and really learning about some specific and unique needs that may exist within region. And so what we're doing as we manage the process is, pulling together all the recommendations, putting together, like a summary of the meetings and sending them out to the meeting participants that will also post online with the slide presentation so that, the presentations used at each of those workshops and the summaries are available for folks to see. The second part of your question about have we changed the meetings, I maybe want to pull the thread on that a little more because part of the construct of the meeting is to do very specific engagement around making sure that we inform folks at the regional and local level about the existing investments and efforts associated with Broadband for All to kind of level set, and then really focus on the 2 1-hour engagement sessions, really directly answering and seeking feedback and input on the questions that the NTIA is asking us to provide answers to on both digital equity and BEAD planning. And then lastly, knowing that there's a strong desire for local communities to engage on the middle mile and the PUC's existing last mile programs. In permitting, there's a broadband infrastructure planning workshop and then a separate ACP workshop. So we're kind of following the same format. I don't know that there's been a really strong identified need to change it, but I'd be interested to know what you're hearing.
And I might comment, and I see that Rebecca Kwama has also commented. As you know, Georgia and Rebecca, from working with us, there is a commonality that we are going through, as Scott just explained, so that we have a framework that allows us to look at the same things from region to region for a statewide picture. Having said that, there is always a different flavor because of being in a community, a different region tailored to that. I appreciate what you and Rebecca did to actually work with us to figure out dates. The state's been very, very responsive to trying to accommodate what'll work in a region. Also, at each of the workshops, there is time for the spokespeople from the covered populations, and that's always unique to the region that the planning partners are recruiting and identifying these spokespeople. And then I hope I've become a little bit more efficient in how we make assignments, because what everybody wants to do is have more conversation among themselves in order to engage. And the state has been editing out a lot of time and talk just to give people more opportunity for input to the state. So that's what I think we've been learning a lot of.
Well, thank you, Scott and Sunny. Georgia, did that answer your question?
Yep, great. Thanks, y'all. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Again, we look forward to the May 6th event. That's special. Anne, back to you.
Thank you, Director. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but I do see Shirley's hand. I'm not sure if that's a legacy hand or if that's a new question. Shirley?
It's a new question. So I had, it's like a 2-component question, but I wanted to know, how are the outcome area work group takeaways going to be incorporated into the state digital equity plan? And how will the engagement from these working groups potentially impact the funds that are allocated to the different covered populations?
Thank you, Shirley. Excellent question. Scott, I know you are pulling all information from all sources. Do you want to give a quick response back to Shirley on kind of how we're going to make sure we're taking all this great wisdom from everyone, sage advice, and pulling it into a informed plan that represents California?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Director Bailey Crimmins, and thanks, Shirley, for the question. All of the inputs we received from the 5 components of the plan are kind of equal inputs that will kind of inform the draft plan. And so, you know, there's not necessarily a weighting, and I'm not necessarily thinking what we're seeing so far is much in conflict, but obviously, you know, taking the input from the working groups, taking the input from the regional planning workshops, weighing and measuring that against what we learned from the phone and the digital equity online survey and what we see in the DEAM tool responses. I think all of those are going to inform a holistic and thoughtful process and approach to developing a draft digital equity plan. And I think one of the things that I would want to note is that you know, there's a lot of great suggestions and strategies and ideas, and like we have to match up those that match with the data, and then the capacity, and then the potential available funding. And so those are going to be some tough, you know, or challenging decisions to make, and that the draft plan will be, you know, published and posted, and there will still be a public comment period for folks to weigh in, and another 2-month process to revise and refine the plan before it's ultimately turned into the NTIA.
Thank you, Scott. Is there any other questions, Anne, before we close and adjourn the meeting today?
I see one hand from Rebecca, and I think that would be the last question we'll take for this afternoon.
Okay, all right, thank you. Rebecca?
Awesome. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, it's lunchtime and I have my little one here, so I apologize if you hear some fun, playful music in the background, but no questions here. I just want to give a shout out to CETF and also the California Department of Technology for their willingness to incorporate all of our concerns. They have been a pleasure to work with. So Scott presented at our Digital Inclusion Stakeholder Committee earlier this month. And it was great to hear all of the work that's taking place, and our stakeholders really appreciate being informed and being included as part of that process. And also just a shout out to the CETF team as well. They have been working closely with me. So Kyle and Kirsten with implementing the event here in Long Beach. So I just appreciate all of the different requests that come from our team and how responsive everybody has been. And we're looking forward to implementing this event here in Long Beach next month. And again, if anyone has any questions about digital equity efforts taking place in Long Beach, feel free to reach out. But I just wanted to take the time to give a shout out to the team because I know it can be a very stressful and huge process. And we're just very grateful for the partnerships that you guys have been establishing. So thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. All right, well, we are coming to a closure. I think there is a thank you slide and also a reminder on the events that are coming up. So I just again want to thank everyone. I know not every attendee was able to stay through the entire 2 hours, but we did have, I think at one point, 180 people. And so that really, and we've kept most everyone all the way through about an hour and a half, and then folks had to start weaning off. But that means that people are very interested in what we're doing. This is just the second statewide digital equity planning group meeting. There will be another one, so please mark it on your calendars for July 22nd. I'm sorry, July 26th. So that again, July 26th, 2023 at 12 p.m. And we want to reiterate how important the planning process is to achieve digital equity throughout the state. And we want to echo the calls to action that we have talked about here today. Please attend the regional planning meetings. It's extremely important to meet in person and have your voice heard. Obviously, if you can't, there are other avenues that we have, the online tools and other ways that you can still continue reaching out, public comment and attending these meetings. Please fill out and distribute the digital equity ecosystem mapping tool, the DEEM tool. And we heard from we call Rich, right, is her nickname, but that even if you only can fill out part of it, data is data, and we want to be able to leverage it as much as possible. Please help distribute the online mobile-friendly digital equity survey, and please attend, again, any of the work groups that are coming in your way, as you can see. And that's just May. We have even more throughout, and Scott and Ann will attest. There's a lot that are coming up, but I just want to thank all of you for your continued engagement and participation, because we all want broadband for all. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn and have a wonderful rest of your day.